Hi, everybody. HelloMakers.com in the front row. I just want to thank, before we start, the build team. They don't get enough credit for doing everything. Suzanne, Brad, Max, Kevin, Matt, and Sarah. I just have to give them a shout out because they're inspiring and wonderful and the hardest working team in show business as far as I'm concerned. Now, Jessica.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Enough about them. So I have so many cards because I have so many questions for you that I had to control myself.
No need.
So again, you are one of my, to say favorite feminists is a really weird statement, but
I'll take it.
You are, one way that I described you to someone was that for the past at least 10 years, you've been working mainly online, but also you've written 5 books before this, right?
Yeah.
And whenever my friends and I sort of need an opinion and we're confused about like, what's the feminist take on this, that we're like, oh, let's just read let's see what Jessica thinks. Let's see what Jessica thinks. And it's true, it's really been a great sort of guide for, if I'm too tired to figure it out, I'll be like, I'll just say what she thinks. So you really have sort of guided a lot of my feminist, thought for the past 10 years.
Thank you.
So thank you for doing that, because I wouldn't have been able to do it myself, literally. So Sex Object is your 6th book, and your past books have been mostly, I guess I would say sort of not agenda-oriented, but have had a really specific either political or social or cultural theme. It's been not a critique, but it's offered sort of solutions, and this is really different.
Yeah.
It's a memoir. It's not about sexism in society. It is about sexism and you a little bit more. And so was that, why'd you make that decision to do that?
You know, it actually wasn't a decision that I made deliberately at first. As you said, my other books have been very issue-driven. My first book, Full Frontal, was very much about trying to get younger people to call themselves feminists. The purity myth was about exposing virginity culture and abstinence-only education. But with this book, I was just sort of writing in my free time in like a much different tone than usual. And before I knew it, I had half a book. I was like, oh, this is happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And is it, I mean, for somebody who, for those of you who know Jessica, I mean, some of your book, in this book and elsewhere, you've written about really being harassed, not just on the street and catcalling in the subway. A lot of your really, I think, most profound, or which spoke to me the most, stories are about being a 12-year-old little girl and being on the subway and having, not just catcalls, but real, exposure at a young age to, you said at one point that you'd wondered if you had a sign that said, yes, sir, I would like to see your penis on you, which is, it was that much. It was really that constant.
Yeah.
And then going into the online world of, equally terrifying sort of harassment online, where you're a blogger, you say your opinions, and that threatens a lot of people. How do you ever get terrified?
Terrified's not, exhausted is probably
right.
probably the word that I would use. But I don't think that my experiences, though obviously like perhaps living in New York and taking the subway makes you a little bit more prone to subway flashers than living in other places. I don't think that sort of fear of harassment or harassment in public spaces, whether it's online public spaces or in real life public spaces, I don't think that it's super uncommon. I think that it's really sadly very, very common, and I think that a lot of women are really exhausted of it.
Just to get a little meta right now, so I was reading this book for the past few weeks. I'm not that fast a reader, and I found myself on the subway taking the book jacket off.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I don't want people to think I'm a sex object, but it's like, what am I reading a guide on how to be a sex object? It's like, in my mind, it's what do people think? And just the idea of having, being afraid of being objectified for reading a book about being objectified is just the most sort of ludicrous feminist quandary.
I know.
Anyway.
Well, I had a similar, it does get pretty ironic pretty fast. I had a guy tweet at me, don't worry, you're not at all sexually objectified, you're only a 5 out of 10. And he's like, let me explain to you how you're not objectified by assigning you a numerical value.
It's funny, one of the things that, as I've been talking about this book to people, I really have been very struck by this being very different than a lot of the other memoirs I've written, I've read, and really and anything that I've described to people. I've described this to really hard-carrying feminists. Broad City watching, Gloria Steinem quoting, hardcore feminists. And when I described to them some of the stuff that happened to you, especially at a young age.
Yeah.
On the subway, which doesn't, I mean, as somebody who grew up in New York City, I do identify a lot with that, and the fear, and then also, what do we do? How do we fight back? You don't want to, you're 12 years old, you don't want to fight. Your dad did try to fight back, which was scary, but also wonderful. And a lot of the people's first reaction was, well, what was she wearing? What was she, what did she do? Which is this crazy reflex that even the most feminist people, that their mind goes right to that. And especially these days with what's happening in the news, why are women held to such a different, why is victimhood not something that's supported, and not something that is seen as something we have to stand behind until we know the facts?
I mean, I wish that we have made better progress on this. We haven't made fantastic progress. We're making some, and I think sort of seeing people rally around the woman in Stanford who came out with that amazing letter has been really heartening to me over the last week. But yeah, there's still a tremendous amount of victim blaming that happens.
And you know, not just by men too. I do think that as much as I think a lot of your experiences with sexism have been men, but I also think what you discuss is, and have discussed before, was this sort of feminist on feminist anger towards, you know, towards each other, that this idea of this online blogosphere being wasting a lot of time infighting rather than sort of,
right.
And have you found that men versus women, have you found a support system of women that have been there, or have you found it a little hard, you know, especially blogging?
Sure. No, I have an amazing community in real life and online, and I think that for the most part, feminists online are absolutely wonderful and amazing. And you know, there's always going to be disagreements. There's always going to be critique, and I think, you know, so long as we're doing it in a way that is progressing the movement forward, I think that's wonderful.
Again, I loved your book so much, but I did make my husband start reading it, and. If only just to be able to have something to talk about other than doing the dishes. And it really struck me that it's actually very much a book, I think, for men as just as much as it is for women. I mean, it's something that women will relate to in terms of the stories about feeling scared or feeling objectified and trying to be empowered, but sometimes failing. Do you think that, where do men fit into this conversation about harassment, about?
Yeah, I think men are central to the conversation, and I think that from what I've heard from men, not just about this book, but about these issues in general, they are really concerned about it. They're worried, they want to help. So I think that they have a huge role to play. And something I've heard a lot about the book and some men's reactions to the book is, you know, I knew that this sort of thing happened. Right. I didn't quite realize how relentless it was throughout life, right? So there's like understanding that like women may go through this like from time to time, but not necessarily understanding that this is like a constantly moving backdrop in your life.
Right, the website Hollaback Girl a few years ago, I'm sure you remember,
yes,
that they put out that, I don't know if any of you saw this, but they did a wonderful, or terrible, but wonderful video of hours and hours of a woman walking down the street, and she was harassed over 100 times in a matter of hours. And what was shocking to me about that, as you point out, is that men were so shocked by it. You know, that so much of my male friends were sort of like, well, that doesn't really, I mean, that's so rare, okay? And it's like, no, that's, and to not understand, to see how little they actually get it, because how could they? They're not us. But exposing them to the reality that we have to face.
Well, I think what's really exciting is like we're in this moment, this really strong moment of a feminist moment, but a moment of women's storytelling, right? And we're seeing this, you know, not just in books, but we're seeing it like on hashtags like Yes All Women, where women really are sharing their experiences and men are listening and learning from it, which is fantastic.
Right. Yeah, makers.com also does that. Storytelling plug. One of the other things that I do think was so fascinating and honest to me about your book was that you really presented yourself as not having all the answers. Like I was saying to one of my friends, I just want to ask her about this and this and this and find out what the answer is. And sometimes, and this is what I think is the most honest and vulnerable and pretty brave thing about your books, is that you don't really say, I have all the answers. I did this thing and it may not have been the right decision. Sometimes I'm not the perfect feminist. This idea of sort of being the perfect feminist, of having to justify wearing lipstick,
Right.
but you're a feminist. How has that affected you, and how would you say for young feminists out there who are trying to, live a genuine life, but also
Sure.
fulfill their feminist duties?
Sure. I think that Roxane Gay and Bad Feminist did us like a really wonderful service by opening up this conversation about like perfect feminism and living up to these sort of unrealistic expectations. I think it impacts all of us, and not just writers or like public-facing feminists. We all sort of put forth the best version of ourselves online, right?
Right.
Like we Instagram only like
Right.
the food that is not burnt. Like all of it is our best self. But at the end of the day, like we are all messy, and that's really what I wanted to get across in the book. I felt strange that I was presenting sort of this one side of myself
Right.
to readers or like
public
followers.
side. Right,
Yeah.
right.
And that's not the whole truth. I don't have all the answers. When you're talking about issues like misogyny and sexism and how to live through that, you can't put a bow on top of that, right? Like it's more questions than answers.
Well, you can, but you're usually wrong. I mean,
Right, you should not. You should not.
A lot of people do put a lot of bows on things, but they don't. Yeah, and having that openness of the not sort of gray areas of feminism and
Yeah.
the not right and wrong, I think is you've done such a tremendous job
Thank you.
conveying that in the book. I do want to talk, because you do discuss your daughter, and you have how old is she?
She'll be 6 in
6.
August.
And your hope that she won't have to experience the same
Yeah.
stuff that you had to go through and that your mom had to go through, which was even worse, and your grandma, and the sort of generations of real objectification and harassment. I know that you're trying to just make her tougher, which and she is, as you've said, but
Yeah.
what can we teach our daughters and even our sons, maybe more importantly, to not be afraid of
Sure.
the man walking down the street? I mean, you live in New York, right?
Yeah, we live in Brooklyn.
So when she's 12, are you going to put her in like some sort of combat uniform or let her out?
I'm still trying to sort it out, right? Like this is part of the problem, and this is like what I was trying to almost work through in the book. We have language for certain things. I can tell her what to do when she's going to take the subway to school. I can tell her what to do when she like packs up and goes away to college. We don't have the language for what it means to like walk through the world as female, though, right? We don't have the language to explain what that cumulative impact of sexism will do to a person, and that's what I'm struggling with her. I think the best we can do, and what my husband and I try to do with our daughter, is just teach her to be a critical thinker, to not accept things as they are, to ask questions, and I'm hoping that will give her a nice set of tools moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'm a cat mom, but I can identify with what you're going through. I can. So, sorry. One of the things that you again discuss in your book a lot is the double standards that exist. And you've discussed this in past books too.
Sure.
But this idea that that again, like wearing lipstick and being a feminist is somehow a double standard, or getting married and being a feminist is somehow a double standard. I'm not fishing for answers, but I technically am. So I'm married to a white male. I admit it. And not that that's anything to be ashamed of, but there's a lot of discussion about marriage and about equality in marriage. And one of the things that you discuss is finding a partner that's equal part dad, equal part friend. And I guess it's very heartening to see someone who I think you have it all figured out, but it is sort of wonderful to see that you finally seem to achieve that balance.
Does it seem that way?
Yes, it does.
Oh, good.
It does. It really does. No, it does. I mean, if anything, just as somebody who's read your stuff for so long, I just think it's so wonderful to see, this memoir side of you, which is much. I mean, I think keep it going. Like you let it out, now just keep it out. Revealing yourself. There's just it's very brave, and very few feminists or people online do it.
Thank you.
If you were to give a piece of advice to a young woman walking down the street and gets smile baby, who gets sort of basic level harassment, and I'm curious about this because I've tried a lot of them, like basic level, like expected,
Your
like going to the
everyday
deli,
sort of,
because I really have. I've I've tried everything as well. I
Yeah.
went to a school that had a uniform. We had to wear short skirts. It was constant. And as it is for a lot of young women growing up in New York City. So you tried giving the finger. That's a little sketchy because you don't know if they'll kill you. And you tried, talking through it and being, to tell me, why do you degrade me? That doesn't seem to work. I have a friend who just burps every time someone does it. So to make them,
That's sort of amazing.
well, she can burp on demand, which is a talent. But what does one do?
There's no perfect solution, right? And I think like one of the interesting things about learning how to navigate this is that you do sort of learn what the best thing to do is in each particular circumstance. I think that women are the best gauges of their own safety, right? And I found as I grew up, and it was such a strange thing, like almost instinctively I would be like, okay, there's not enough people around, I'm not gonna say something back to this person, or I'm gonna choose to like look down, or there are a lot of people around, or I do feel safe in this particular moment, so I'm gonna curse them out.
Right.
The only person who can judge what the best thing to do is that person in that individual moment, because it is such a safety issue, right?
And you get scared and you freeze up and.
Yeah, there's all sorts of reactions to that, and the truth is, and street harassment can get violent. We've seen, a lot of women killed over the last couple of years, actually, for refusing to give out numbers and just rejecting men's advances.
I can't not ask about Hillary.
Sure.
Are we excited? I mean, I'm very excited.
I'm excited.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Just checking.
Just making sure.
It is going to be interesting though to see, as somebody who's been sort of taken down and had a lot of backlash against in the past, with all everything that you've shared and your ideas, no matter how not threatening it is, it seems to be a big discussion. And Rebecca Tracier's book about Hillary and the sexist sort of rhetoric that surrounded her initial campaign in 2008 was so fascinating that it is going to be interesting to see the kind of online stuff that happens as she moves further.
I think online and offline, I think no matter how you feel about the two candidates running, like this is going to be a referendum on gender and sexism in the US, and that is going to be fascinating to watch and really important.
And it almost seems like the two, I mean, of course we have a woman running against, I mean, it just seems...
A caricature of
I
misogyny.
Mean, you can't, if you decided to get into fiction and you wrote the character of Donald Trump, I don't think it would people would be like, that's not a believable character, Jessica. So it's amazing that that's the person who's going to be up against, the first possible woman president.
It's poetic justice.
It really is. All right, so again, you are again one of my favorite feminist writers, authors, and I do want to know just quickly, and again, I don't want to cause any controversy, just Lemonade, go.
Fantastic. I mean, is there even a question?
No, I don't know. I just feel like I just need to get your approval on it.
Of course. I mean, I don't think, no.
Right, no, right? Right.
Amazing,
no,
amazing.
Right? Okay,
incredible.
Good. I'm just checking.
Amazing.
No, just checking.
It is very. I mean, I do find it very strange though that that this is even a question, right? Like why? I actually find and this has been especially true of Beyonce, but also true of like other celebrity or high profile women's feminism, where it's like, is she or isn't she? I'm like, that's not the right question.
Right.
Maybe why don't we talk about what does Beyonce's feminism look like? Why is it important? Like, let's get into the...
And in a sense, for her to put out something that was so honest, again, I am comparing you to Beyonce. I'm going to do it. Putting out something that's honest and then having people somewhat, pull it apart and question its feminism, question, if you, I mean, in your case, it was, this idea of sort of, well, she acted really irresponsibly, so she deserved to be, treated in a degrading way. But the fact that that's up for grabs whenever, you or Beyonce put something out, I don't think the same thing would happen if Jay-Z put out an album. I don't think questioning his philosophies or political beliefs would necessarily be in question.
Yeah, I think when it comes to women's stories, it is really interesting. Again, we are in this really important moment when it comes to women's stories, but I think it is still true that when men talk about their lives and experiences, it is presented as sort of a universal truth. Right. And when women do it, it is navel-gazing or frivolous or self-involved, right?
Right. How did you, In doing a memoir, though, was that in your mind at all? I mean,
Yeah, of course, but you have to, you know what I mean? Like, you have to push through that. I mean, I think it almost made it easier for me to write this because I've been doing feminist work online for over 10 years. Like, I've heard every nasty thing.
Right.
I'm like,
you have
what's like,
you have a section that includes all the nasty things, just like
Yeah.
unadulterated, most disgusting stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wonder what that's the Wikipedia
It's at the end of the
page.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's entertaining but disturbing. I think we're going to go to an audience Q&A.
Cool.
Does anyone have any cues?
Hi, Jessica.
hello.
What are your thoughts on Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In?
And Lean In. I think that Sheryl Sandberg is great, and I think that I really liked Lean In. I think that some of the sort of feminist controversy that arose around it was this idea that it was meant to be like a feminist Bible rather than like an advice book about one particular specific issue. I don't think that it's a book for everyone, and I think that that's okay. I think that sometimes it's fine to have like a narrow goal or vision in mind, and certainly the book has opened up a lot of conversations, I think, that wouldn't necessarily have been there before. That said, I do wish that mainstream conversations about women in work would not always center sort of women who are making the most money, when you consider that like the folks who really need it or who are really struggling are not necessarily in the boardroom, right?
Yes, the woman in the white.
First of all, great conversation. I could listen to the two of you all day long. It's fascinating. Great moderator, Amanda. So you started talking a little bit about Beyonce and her feminism, and I'm curious to hear your take on her feminism.
More about her feminism?
What does that mean? Like, I mean, you guys didn't get into it. I just want to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've actually really enjoyed sort of learning about Beyonce's feminism through reading Black feminists. I think that that's been a really important thing for me, and it's been really interesting to see sort of some of the reaction to Lemonade and Beyonce by folks who felt like it was too much for Black women, as if that's a problem. And I think that sometimes white feminists have this issue of like, if it's not for them, it's not okay. Like, not everything has to be, again, not everything has to be for everyone. And I think that Beyonce, Lemonade, and her work recently is very much targeted towards Black feminists and Black women, and I think that that's wonderful and important.
How's it going, Jessica?
Hi.
My name is Debbie. My question is, have you ever seen a movie that you believe that really accurately portrayed women, like a movie that didn't like degrade them in any way? And if so, what movie was that?
Oh my God, what a question.
The least
This is-
degrading movie
I'm
of
gonna-
all time in the history of movies. What is the least degrading? Easy question.
That's so difficult. I mean, I think that there are lots of movies out there. I don't think that I could like pick one that's like this is the feminist movie. Like, this is the movie that doesn't objectify women or you know. What's important to me when I think about culture and when I think about media and like what I like to watch, I do like to watch stuff that's written by women or directed by women, or that at least has like a nice critical mass of women, and not all white women in the writer's room, right? Or like as showrunners. And I think that we're seeing an increase of that, especially in television, maybe a little bit more so than movies, and that's really fantastic. But I do think we still have a long way to go. Like, when you have stuff happening like the huge bizarre backlash to Ghostbusters, right? Like, we still have a long way to go if people are really mad about that. There was Billy Eichner, who's great and a comedian, and we went to high school together, actually had this like hilarious tweet the other night when Hillary was giving her speech. He was like, "I'm fine with a woman president so long as she doesn't try to bust any ghosts." And I liked it.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
Hey Jessica, how are you?
Hi.
I consider myself a feminist. I've been one of the leaders of the Free Kesha movement, as well as writing for the Huffington Post about objectification in the music industry. I know a lot of people who are afraid to speak out and get involved in just having an open discussion, both men and women. So what's the best way to inspire other people to also have their voices heard?
That's a great question. I mean, I think just modeling that behavior is really fantastic, right? And just doing it yourself and showing people that it can be done is one way to do it. I think what's difficult about encouraging other people to use their voice is that we all have different sort of opportunities, right, and consequences to using our voice. And I was thinking a lot about this as I wrote the book. It's safe for me to write this book, right? Even though I'm saying a lot of stuff in it, I'm revealing a lot of personal information, I'm not gonna lose my job over it. Like, my body will be safe, my job will be safe, my family will be safe, and that's not necessarily true for everyone. So I think it's like trying to find that balance between encouraging people to come forward, but also understanding that not everyone has the same privilege to be able to do so.
I think we're out of time. One more question, sorry, one more
Great.
question.
Hi, Jessica. Thanks for being here. You briefly touched on the Stanford rape case that is taking over all the news right now.
Sure.
How do you think the rallying around the victim and her letter is going to change the conversation going forward?
I really think, and I've said this before, I think that we're gonna look back and see this letter as a real watershed moment in the conversation around sexual assaults and rape culture. And I think that it's incredible and it's really heartening to see that so many people have read and shared her letter, and I hope it inspires other people to do the same. That said, we still have so far to go, right? Like, it's one thing to read a letter, it's one thing to share a letter, it's another thing to try to shift the culture away from something like this happening again.
Great answer. So please go buy this amazing book in all fine feminist bookstores and elsewhere. And also, Jessica also writes amazing pieces for The Guardian, so check those out and go to jessicavalenti.com.
Yeah.
Just troll her. I mean, don't troll her badly, but troll her like a fan. And please go buy it because it's a good beach read. I'm gonna say it's a feminist beach read as far as feminist reads go. It's a great piece of summer reading and really touching, and I'm so impressed and proud of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.